Today, I am going to talk into the camera for as long as I want in order to practice talking in front of the camera. Another reason I'm doing this is because I need more ideas. I have ideas in my head, and I need to get them on paper or on video. I need them to be recorded somehow, and getting on camera and encouraging myself to talk like this will inevitably lead to the ideas getting spoken or expressed or written down in some way. Now, the idea might not come out today on this, but it will be churned in my head. The gears will turn, and that's productive. I could go for a walk and do what I'm doing now in my head, but why not make a video? Because I'm trying to learn how to make videos, and this will help me improve my speaking, my clarity. I won't say or too many more times. I'm trying to cut back. I'm trying to cut back on my cursing. I don't want to curse as much. I feel when I curse, I give up whatever it was I really wanted to say. I'm upset at something, and I want to describe how upset I am. I want to describe how awful this thing is. And instead of getting to the heart of that, I curse. Cursing has been a habit of mine for a long time. It's a habit I'm familiar with. And those words are close to me. They're within reach. I don't want them to be. I want them to drift away to, because of disuse, leave my arm's reach. And this video should help that too. This video is helpful. What are we going to talk about in the video as I do those things in the background? Well, everything behind me. I have lots of books, and we're going to talk about some. I talked about this in my last video. Additional dialogue, Letters of Dalton Trumbo. Arguably my favorite book of all time. Dalton is smart, clever, moral. He shows you how to be courageous, how to defend yourself. And the thing he defends is the First Amendment, which never meant much to me until I read this and until I started to think about the freedom of speech and how recent its invention is. Even though it came about with the Constitution, which is still recent history, it wasn't immediately put into use. We have to fight for it every few decades. There's court cases or simply social conversations that threaten freedom of speech in one way or another. Important book. This is The Pleasure of Finding Things Out. It's the best short works of Richard Feynman. My dad actually just bought this book, his own copy, in Montana. We were there fly fishing, and in the Bozeman Public Library, they have a cafe where they also sell used books. You can get coffee and a cheap book, and among those books was this. My dad knows I'm a huge fan of Feynman, and my dad's never read a proper Feynman book. He's read Feynman's books on physics, but never his short works. So he got it. You might not know who Feynman is. He is another person in my pantheon, along with Dalton Trumbo. Richard Feynman was a physicist who worked on the Manhattan Project, which is the project in New Mexico, Los Alamos, that developed the nuclear bomb during World War II that was later dropped in Japan. He won a Nobel Prize. He discovered what made the Challenger shuttle blow up, which was defective O-rings. All in all, he is a really intelligent and talented physicist, and what makes him stand out is that he has a knack for communication. He is one of the best communicators the science world has ever produced. Scientists aren't known for being good communicators. They're known for being rational and persistent and able to work long hours by themselves without food or water. He enjoys standing up and talking to people about his ideas. He enjoys telling people like you or me, non-scientists who don't have a foundation. He enjoys coming up with accessible metaphors, and that makes him an interesting communicator who I as a writer can benefit from, and that you could too. Richard Feynman. I can't really say all that without reading something. I gotta give you a taste. I guess we can start with the very first thing that is in the book. It's called The Beauty of a Flower. It's less than a page, and it goes like this. I have a friend who's an artist, and he's sometimes taken a view which I don't agree with very well. He'll hold up a flower and say, "Look how beautiful it is," and I'll agree, I think. And he says, "You see, I as an artist can see how beautiful this is, but you as a scientist, well, you take it apart and it becomes a dull thing." And I think that he's kind of nutty. First of all, the beauty that he sees is available to the other people, and to me too, I believe, although I might not be quite as refined aesthetically as he, but I can appreciate the beauty of a flower. At the same time, I see much more about the flower than he sees. I can imagine the cells in there, the complicated actions inside, which also have a beauty. I mean, it's not just beauty at this dimension of 1 centimeter. There's also beauty at a smaller dimension, the inner structures, also the processes, the fact that the colors in the flowers evolved in order to attract insects to pollinate it is interesting. It means that insects can see the color. It adds a question. Does this aesthetic sense also exist in the lower forms? Why is it aesthetic? All kinds of interesting questions which show that a science knowledge only adds to the excitement and mystery and the awe of a flower. It only adds. I don't understand how it subtracts. That is Feynman talking about beauty and art. And he doesn't ever talk about beauty or art again, not very much. He is a 100% scientific-minded person, but that is his view on why he can understand beauty as well as anybody else. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5 Feynman books here and 1 that I have lent to a friend. Yeah. Ooh. Since we're going through the top of my pantheon, Dalton Trumbo, Richard Feynman, 2 people who, if I was stranded on an island and I could only take one person's body of work, it would be one of those people. This is another person, E.B. White. You know E.B. White because he wrote Stuart Little and he wrote Charlotte's Web. He also wrote, if you're a writer, you've probably heard of the book Elements of Style. That's a book that explains how to write well, how to approach your style. And these are his compiled letters. They start when he's 8 years old and go until he dies. I was reading a letter and it said, "I love to ice skate. I feel like an angel. I'm free and able to glide without working for it." And I said, "Ooh, that's poetic. I like that." And then I realized he's 12 years old at the time of writing that. He is the real thing also, a great writer to read. Simple style, straightforward, American, lived on a farm. That also gives him a lot of appeal to me and to my dad. E.B. is the first writer who I ever showed to my dad in order to get my dad into reading, because my dad lives on a farm. His dad was the farmer. It's the family farm, the Kaiser farm. And There's a lot of stories about ducks and geese that gossip and other things that you can tell Charlotte's Web was inspired by. And my dad really liked that stuff. My dad is his own video series. I started to write my book 2 years ago, and around that time, my dad was laid off. So he had lots of free time. He and I both had lots of free time, and we started to spend a lot of time together, go on day trips and drives, and reading was something that he had never done before. He didn't like books. He was not into school. Once he told me, "What's books? That's what homework is. They're full of shit." This is his view. This is him recounting what books felt like to him when he was in 4th grade. He told me, once I raised my hand and said, "Teacher, the book has a typo. They put an M in front of the word nature." And since then, he hasn't had a great relationship with books. EB was able to get him to read. And since then, he's read Mark Twain. He's read Ray Bradbury, Ben Franklin, Abe Lincoln. He's reading John Steinbeck now. He reads. He's a reader, and he always talks about books and buys books. He's a reader now. So if you have someone in your life that you want to introduce reading to, EB is a great place to start. He talks about universal things that anybody can understand and anybody can appreciate. He's straightforward. I wouldn't start with his letters. This is for someone who already really likes the author, and you would read his letters to understand more about his life. I bought this so I could learn how to write, so I could observe how he wrote informally, how he wrote spontaneously to his friends. I would start someone off with E.B. White's essays. You can Google, they're on Amazon. I have lent out. A lot of my favorite books I can't show you because I've lent them out. But this is an older collection of essays by E.B. White. The Second Tree from the Corner. Look at that cover. It's pens, I think a piece of candy in the middle. That's awesome. I really love that. This is an older collection of essays, and if you want to get this, if you find this on the shelf, buy this. I love E.B.'s collection of essays. They're reprinted here and there through the years, so I can't tell which ones you need and which ones overlap or which ones are remixes. But this is an old good one. He's a big fan of Henry David Thoreau, the guy who wrote Walden, who's also an outdoorsman, also about independence of mind and individual thinking. So if you like Walden, you'll definitely like E.B. E.B.'s updated, much more approachable. While we're talking about essays, I'm going to show you this. The Art of the Personal Essay. This is a huge book. I found it at the Goodwill for 50 cents. At my Goodwill, it varies, but at mine, softcover books are 50 cents, so I got this. If you want to be a good writer, you want to read essays. Essays are the easiest way to learn writing because they're short, they're only a few pages, they're potent. Someone who writes an essay has a specific point they want to get across. They want to argue about the war. They want to explain why XYZ is good manners. They want to express a personal memory and tell an anecdote. Like me talking about my dad. I might write an essay exclusively about my dad. It might only be 3 or 4 pages, but when you're done, you have a great picture of this writer and his relationship with his father. And you can find essay compilations for days. There are lots. I actually have a really good one. It's only 10 essays. Each one is good. but I have that one lent to my grandma, so I can't give it to you or show you or remember the title. But this one is good. I don't know how much this costs. Hopefully you can get it cheap. We'll talk about how to get cheap books later. I don't like to pay. If I pay more than 50 cents for a book, it must be really good. Classic essays are Frederick Douglass, How I Learned to Read and Write. Frederick Douglass was one of the first slaves to learn how to read. It's an incredible story. Very few people have put into words their experience of learning how to read and write. And for a writer, this should be interesting to you. He says that he had to learn letter by letter. The people who owned him wouldn't let him read. They let him read initially. They tried to teach him a little bit, and then the dad said, "Nah, fuck that." And the mom stopped. He wasn't allowed to read. So he would have to walk around town and pick up letters and try to figure out what they mean. He would pay school kids in in food that he didn't eat or change from money that he managed to get. He would pay little kids to tell him how to read things. And over months and months, it took him years to learn how to read on his own. Incredible essay. That's one classic essay you will always see. Another classic essay is Helen Keller's essay, How I Learned to Speak. I don't remember the title, but it's similar to the Frederick one. And it's her famous essay where she explains how she learned her first word, which was water. And that's a great essay too. She's 5 years old. She hasn't learned any words. When you're 5, you know tons of words. You have a lot of complexity in how you're able to communicate. Helen Keller had nothing. And she could only shake her head or nod her head or tug on someone's arm and point. And she was having tantrums because what she wanted to communicate had far outgrown her vocabulary. She describes this. Read that essay. It's a great essay. Other famous essays, Henry David Thoreau usually has an essay in these books. So does Ben Franklin. You'll always find Martin Luther King. Letter from a Birmingham jail is a famous letter he wrote to white priests who said, "Mr. King, please stop this freedom stuff you're doing. It's disrupting society and making people unhappy. We Christians agree that Black people probably are mistreated. Would you mind postponing your activities till we can find a more convenient time?" Martin Luther King says, the word wait rings with pain in the ears of Black people because it means never. He has over 200 one-liners like that in that letter from a Birmingham jail. Read it. It's amazing. And when you're done reading that, you can read the 750-page A Testament of Hope by Martin Luther King Jr., which are his essential writings and speeches. He's a great, great, great thinker. Smart, practiced, passionate. You got to get him in your library. Is there anything I want to show you? Oh, George Orwell. He has an essay called Shooting an Elephant. Famous essay again that you're always going to find. More essays. William S. Burroughs, The Adding Machine. He was the older guy in the trio of Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac, the Beat Generation in the 50s. George Orwell, All Art is Propaganda. This is one of the first books I ever bought after being a kid. I consciously decided I wanted to read, and I found this at the bookstore near my house. This and Ray Bradbury's Zen in the Art of Writing. And this is where Shooting an Elephant is. He wrote 1984, by the way. The Theater Essays of Arthur Miller. These are great, great essays. Arthur Miller wrote The Crucible and Death of a Salesman, which has Dustin Hoffman in the movie version. He has a great essay about why the government should subsidize the arts and help pay for theater. He cites European countries that have done this forever and credits that to theater being a big part of their culture. Cool essays. He's smart. The theme of this is you want to go to the source. You want to talk to these genius authors, the ones who have shaped American and world culture, and see exactly what they said, their firsthand words. How did they think? How did they prove their points? How did they sound on paper? That's the end of the video. Thanks for watching. We looked at some cool books, and I'm going to rearrange my bookshelf or clean it up now, and we'll look at some more next time.